Welcome to Send Me Radio. Don't forget to love, share, and subscribe. The Sahel. Untold story you need to know of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. They were not born poor. Once upon a land, fierce, fertile, and full of light, there stood mighty kingdoms where gold glittered in riverbeds, scholars debated in desert cities, and the drums of sovereignty beat freely under open skies. This was the Sahel, spanning from the edge of the Sahara down into the heart of West Africa. Niger. Mali. Here's the historical breakdown. 11th to the 13th centuries. The Ghana Empire, not the modern country, flourished across parts of present-day Mali, Mauritania, and Burkina Faso. It was the first major empire in the Sahel known for gold production and trade. 13th to the 15th centuries. The Mali Empire emerged, with Mansa Musa, ruled 1312 to 1337, bringing it to legendary global prominence. Cities like Timbuktu and Gao became world centers for trade, education, religion, and culture. 15th to the 16th centuries. The Songhai Empire succeeded Mali as the dominant power in the region, maintaining scholarly and economic brilliance in the heart of the Sahel until the Moroccan invasion in 1591. But what has now become of this region when the colonists stepped in? Wars, deforestation, famine, poverty to the people. But the exploitation of the land continues. They speak of aid but give far less than they continue to take. Mansa Musa, the richest man in recorded history, came from this very region. More specifically, Mansa Musa was the emperor of the Mali Empire, which, at its height in the 14th century, included much of what is now Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Niger, Ivory Coast, and significant parts of Burkina Faso. His empire's influence extended across much of the Sahel region, especially along the Niger River basin, which was the economic and cultural lifeline of West Africa. Why this matters? Mansa Musa's Mali Empire is a direct historical ancestor to modern-day Mali and Burkina Faso. His leadership, wealth, and development of centers like Timbuktu are undeniable proof that these lands were not poor. They were global powers before colonization. Historical facts about Timbuktu. Region. Near. The Niger River flows in a wide arc across the southern half of the country, curving eastward and passing near cities like Mopti and Gao. Timbuktu is the French word for Timbuktu. It also lies just south of the Sahara Desert. Timbuktu was once a thriving center of trade, and scholars, and culture, especially during the height of the Mali Empire and later the Songhai Empire. It housed world-famous institutions like the Sankore University, the Ahmed Baba Institute. It still has thousands of ancient manuscripts, many of which are still preserved today. Key highlights. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage 1324. His hajj to Mecca was so extravagant, caravans of gold, thousands of servants, that it disrupted economies across North Africa. Timbuktu became a world-renowned center of learning, home to scholars, massive libraries, and trade in gold, manuscripts, and ideas. Control of trade. The empire controlled vast trans-Saharan trade routes, including salt and gold routes that passed through what is now Burkina Faso. A land that once thrived with dignity, its people rooted in tradition, its earth rich with promise. But what has become of this region since the colonists stepped in? Where once there were kingdoms, now there are conflicts. Where forests once shaded the land, now there is deforestation. Where granaries once overflowed, now there is famine. Where self-sufficiency once defined the people, now there is crippling poverty. And yet, the exploitation continues. The land still gives. Gold is still pulled from the soil. Uranium is still mined beneath scorched villages. Rare earths, timber, oil, and manganese still leave on trucks, planes, and tankers. But the people? They are left with the dust. This is not just a story of colonization. It is a systematic bleeding of a region once bursting with life, a slow-motion theft that has lasted centuries. The invaders may have come with ships and weapons, but today they wear suits, sign contracts, and speak the language of aid and partnership, while still taking everything that matters. They were not born poor. They were born proud. They were made poor. This video is not about pity. It's about power stolen and power returning. It's about how empires built their thrones on African soil, how they dressed up theft as diplomacy, and how modern-day resistance is rising, not with empty slogans, but with fire in the bones of a new generation. It's about how the wealth siphoned from these lands over centuries helped fuel the prosperity of nations far away, while leaving the very people who owned it in manufactured destitution. Gold beneath the sand, chains above the ground. Long before Europe knew the meaning of wealth, West Africa was already swimming in it. The Empire of Mali, under Mansa Musa, controlled so much gold that his pilgrimage to Mecca caused economic inflation across North Africa and the Middle East. The city of Timbuktu, in present-day Mali, had libraries, astronomers, and university scholars when Paris was still in the Dark Ages. Its extensive trans-Saharan trade routes connected vast networks of commerce and culture. In Niger, ancient trade routes brought salt, silver, and silk across desert caravans to connect the continent, fostering vibrant communities. Burkina Faso had thriving spiritual traditions, sophisticated agricultural systems, and art that defied Western ideas of development. But these lands had something else too, resources the world would kill for. Gold, uranium, manganese, oil. And so they came, the invaders. The invasion in ink and iron. In the late 1800s, European powers gathered at the Berlin Conference. No Africans were invited. No tribal elders. No kings. No voices from the land. Just European men with pens and whiskey glasses, drawing lines on a map like slicing a cake. To the victor went the minerals. To the native went the misery. France took Niger, Mali, and what would become Burkina Faso, known then as the Upper Volta. They claimed they came to civilize, but they came to steal. The sheer volume of raw materials extracted during this period laid the foundation for European industrial growth and wealth. Roads were not built for development, they were built to extract. Schools were not built to empower, they were built to control. And resistance was not tolerated, it was crushed. Whole villages were burned. Elders were beheaded. Language, faith, and identity were suppressed. But the worst of it was the economic rape, the systematic siphoning of Africa's wealth to enrich foreign powers, a legacy that continues to this day. The fake independence. By the 1960s, France could no longer justify its grip. African nations demanded freedom, and in response, France gave them independence on paper, but created a new invisible cage. The CFA franc system. This currency, tied to the French treasury, meant that half of national reserves from 14 African countries had to be stored in France. These nations couldn't devalue or control their own currency. France earned interest while Africa starved. It was like giving back a stolen house, but keeping the keys to every door and charging rent. This was neocolonialism. And the takers now wore suits, not swords. The age of extraction. Fast forward to the 21st century. Niger has some of the richest uranium mines on Earth. France built its nuclear power on the back of Nigerian soil. But over 80% of Niger's population has no electricity. Villages remain in darkness while Paris glows. Mali is the third largest gold producer in Africa. Yet its children die in slums with no clean water. Burkina Faso is rich in manganese, limestone, and gold, but the riches flow outward, not inward. Multinational corporations own the contracts. African leaders, in some cases, were paid off, acting as complicit intermediaries in the grand theft. Western media called this development. But it was daylight robbery with documents signed in boardrooms instead of battlefields. Blood in the earth, billions in their banks. What the Sahel gives the world, and what the world gives back, they call them developing nations. But that's not accurate. The only thing developing was foreign profit margins. Let's break it down, mineral by mineral. Uranium from Niger. Uses. Nuclear energy, medical isotopes, weapons. Fact. Powers 70% of France's electricity. What Niger gets? Less than 10% of market value. Towns near the mines have no electricity. Radiation illnesses rise. Families live in squalor while watching their wealth vanish. Gold. From Mali, Burkina Faso. Use. Jewelry, bank reserves, electronics. Facts: Mali exports over $6 billion in gold annually. What they get? Over 70% survives on less than $2 a day. Most gold profits leave the country. Chronic underfunding cripples schools and hospitals. Manganese. From Burkina Faso. Use. Steel, EV batteries. Fact. Crucial to global green tech, this is one of the raw materials needed to make electric cars. What they get? Raw exports. No factories. No local industries. Paid pennies while global demand skyrockets. Lithium. Emerging in Mali. Use, EV batteries, smartphones, renewable energy storage. Fact. Called white gold. What Mali gets? Contracts favor foreign companies. Communities fear another cycle of extraction without transformation. Oil. Chad, Niger. Use, fuel, petrochemicals. Fact, shipped out through pipelines to global markets. What they get? 2%, 5% of revenues. Environmental damage, corruption, and displaced families. Resistance reignited. The people began to wake up. Coups erupted in Mali 2021, Burkina Faso 2022, and Niger 2023. But these weren't ordinary coups. They were revolts against foreign puppets, against empty democracies, and against decades of systemic exploitation. While military takeovers present their own challenges, these were met with unprecedented popular support, driven by a desperate desire for genuine change. Young military leaders, many in their 30s, rose up. They expelled French troops. They cut ties with the CFA franc system. They rejected IMF loans and World Bank traps. They called for African unity and true independence. The West panicked. They sent sanctions. They labeled them military juntas. They threatened intervention. But the streets told a different story. People cheered. Flags waved. Chants of "Down with France" echoed through capital cities. Finally, they said, "Finally, someone is fighting for us." Remember to subscribe to hear more awesome history and development on Send Me Radio. A new vision. The dream of a sovereign, united Sahel, exploring pathways to genuine self-determination and prosperity. The Sahel will rise and is rising. This is not the end. This is the unveiling of truth. A new generation is waking up, unchained from mental slavery, armed with courage, and grounded in identity. They know the game. They see the lies behind the smiles. And they are no longer afraid. From the sands of Niger to the gold veins of Mali, from the fields of Burkina Faso to the hearts of its people, Africa is remembering who she is. And when memory returns, power follows. They were not born poor. They were born powerful. And that power is returning. This is Send Me Radio, where we discuss stories, faith, history, community. Subscribe for more awesome content.